Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery and we're checking in on a couple systems that we together have not checked in on for 14 days now, but during those past 2 weeks I've been coming in to check in on these systems numerous times. I think it's been four check-ins of the two systems that I've got running horizontal migrations in. They're right over here where the oldest of my systems are kept. And you can sort of already tell just from the layout that the finished castings, the vermicompost, is over on this side, and the opposite edge is where we've set up a really tempting place for the worms to be, drawn to hopefully get them to just evacuate their castings voluntarily, and then we harvest just by scooping out, and we relocate just by scooping the worms out and giving them a new home. And on the topic of a new home for them, we've already got a couple bins all lined up. I'm just sort of trying their position on the shelf on for size, but you can see no labels, so those are really just systems that are priming in preparation for occupation. And those systems have been priming since we started the migration 14 days ago. So in a way, the new home for these little guys is almost ready. You could almost consider it ready now if we wanted to move them. But I didn't want to move them today. Since I've been checking in, I know what the story is in here, and I'm pretty certain we've still got worms. So my aim was just to check the food supply. I did bring down food, and I figured we'd just stock up the food in the horizontal migration feeding zone, verify everything's good, and perhaps even aerate the castings. Try to help them dry, make them less hospitable for the worms to want to remain in. So let's get to work. So yeah, really quick, before we get started, I just created this little timeline sort of thing, not very well to scale, especially the 2 weeks, the 14 days at the end should only be a tiny minuscule fraction of the original 199 days of everyday composting, and then, continued composting in the form of foraging where no new bedding gets added. And then after that time, we started into the horizontal migration. So 26 feedings. And in my mind, I always consider that feeding that gets laid in to try to motivate the worms to come on over so they can harvest these castings out here. That feeding's really got nothing to do with those castings that are being harvested, right? I could already kind of hear people out there in the audience like, oh, there he goes with that stupid topic again. I don't know, whatever. It's just a little fine distinction I have in my mind about the number of feedings that I keep track of, obviously. So I report on it regularly to you guys, and then just maybe at some point, if I can come up with a standardization of what each feeding represents or a unit, and then maybe even later I start measuring the amount of castings and vermicompost that gets harvested, then I can really start equating quantities of food and bedding to output in terms of castings produced. So, all right, I don't know why I took the time there to bother. Usually I don't bother, but let's at least get these little guys we evicted off the plastic into the proper location here. Because, man, this stuff's dry. Well, it's not that dry. They would not have to go very far to get into fairly comfortable stuff, but this stuff has been drying nicely. It's been cooperating, and every time I've kind of gone in here, let's just check over here really quick before we come closer to my side, just to get a read on remaining worm count. So when I mentioned earlier that I knew that there was still worms in here, that was based on my last check-in, which was, I believe, 2 days ago at this point. And here and there I was definitely encountering worms. And you can see what I'm doing here. I'm taking this really dry stuff out on the surface and I'm sending it down into the more moist material that's down below. And it's definitely not all that moist anymore. Definitely not like it looked when you guys last saw it, I believe. At this point, this stuff is really becoming super flaky, nice and flowing, and definitely not clumping together anymore. Here and there I would even take the opportunity to try to break up little fragments of material that are still holding together due to moisture. And here especially you could see how many more worms are still present in the material. And that's, in my mind at least, I believe that's got a lot to do with just the amount of moisture that's still present, offering the worms a nice cozy place to just hang out and stay in. But then again, what we're doing right now, blending in all that nice dry stuff that was out on the surface, as I've done a number of times now over the past 2 weeks, continues to help drive down the moisture level, and it also drives down the appeal of the stuff for the worms to want to stay in. So in the past, one thing we've done with my horizontal migration feeding zones was build them out. We would, add a bunch of bedding and a bunch of food. That's one thing I've not done during the check-ins without you guys. The one thing I did add, though, a number of times was moisture. Even when it wasn't needed, I would come in here and I would check out what's happening over here in the horizontal migration feeding zone, the tiny horizontal migration feeding zone, and usually add water. I believe out of the 4 check-ins, I probably added water 3 of the times. I believe on the first check-in, I might not have even looked at the horizontal migration feeding zone. I just sort of ignored it. So even here at the very edge, closest to where the feeding zone is, where there often is a little bit more moisture up against the little partition, here it feels like bin 1 is definitely marching fast and furious towards the finish line, because I'm almost at the point where I'm thinking, with the dry stuff we just blended in now, it's going to probably get the last of the worms that are still holding out and hanging out in the stuff to have second thoughts about whether they want to stay. But we don't want to shock the system, we don't want to come in and do anything radical. I've been trying to make it a nice, gradual, slow process of the material drying off, but helping it basically. In the past, one thing we've done is just let it happen on its own, but without tilling the top surface, a couple inches maybe tops, we'll start seeing a little bit of drying off, but everything right below that is going to stay quite damp and be incapable of drying off. Just the nature of the castings, they hold on to their moisture so good. So I don't know, I'm kind of questioning whether this is ludicrous to do something like this, but look at the size of this piece of vegetable here. This is just something that I got as a donation. I believe it's a cucumber. I'm just looking at the seeds in there, and just the general look of the thing. But when I first cut it, I couldn't see any seeds. It made me wonder what the heck this thing. It looked like something completely different. And then this here, this is what you get when you start picking out the cantaloupe's seeds, which, believe it or not, is something I've been doing lately. Collecting up pepper seeds, cantaloupe seeds, different things to include in my next worm chow. So, all right, let's get back on track here. So, just to show you why I was having second thoughts as to whether this was important or not, right here, that's a piece of banana peel right there. Right next to it is another one. So there is food, and the worms are all over it. And whether I would want to come in with that big piece of cucumber, my thinking on that was that, we'd be replenishing the food supply. And at the same time, rather than coming in with the squirt bottle, we'd also be introducing a good bit of moisture, because once that thing starts to thaw out, I don't think it's going to remain a solid piece of vegetable very long. I think the worms are going to pick up on the fact that there's this thing over there emitting a ton of moisture as it thaws, and they're just going to go over there and go to town on it. So here too, it feels like there's a good bit more worm traffic still going on back in the vermicompost. So here it seemed like I didn't see as many worms hanging out down on the banana as we saw in bin 1, but it's still fair to say that we're getting a nice turnout here in the horizontal migration feeding zones. So, I Oops. Okay. Let's try to keep all these little guys here. I don't want to be like a big scaredy cat. I think we're just going to go for it. I'm going to just go with my initial impulse, which led me to grab that thing from the freezer and bring it down here in the first place. And I think we're just going to go for it. And the only supplementary bedding, this is where we would normally add a good bit of bedding. But my only idea for bedding here was just to have at least a little bit of a, like an insulating layer. So when I drop in that big piece of frozen vegetable matter, the only thing it's touching is paper, not any nearby wormies. And this should be a nice tempting little treat for the worms too, I'm imagining. So that just seems so crazy right there. I don't know why. It seems like it's perhaps a little bit more than is needed. So I don't know, did I block the view of what I'm doing here with these horizontal migration feeding zone partition walls? Hopefully not. Hopefully you can see what I'm up to over here. But we're almost done. It's just really making sure that these wormies have everything they need, and I believe that the evidence is clear here that the moisture is probably the main thing that the worms can be motivated with in terms of either getting them to leave or come to, you know. You always get their attention with the moisture, that's for sure. All right, I think we're starting to draw this out a little bit longer than it needs to be. We're really done at this point. There's really nothing left to do here other than I guess I try to get the partition to be up against the feeding zone so it can be nice and tempting for the worms that pass by, and they could just come on over and then we could level off. And I assume that I'll be back in here once or twice to do a similar check-in, just to aerate, but not to add food or bedding or anything like that. I would just be aerating just to help drive the process that we're doing here together. And I wouldn't want to, you know, let you guys miss out on any interesting developments, so I'll definitely be including you in the next significant check-in, which I believe at this point is almost certain to be a an extraction, a haul out of worms, and an introduction of the worms to their lovely new home. So that's it for our check-in, everyone, with the red wiggler worms getting pretty close to the point where I think we can start thinking about getting them into their new home, which awaits and is ready for them today if we wanted to. But that'll be next time, and hopefully you'll be here with me when we do that next time. And as far as today, I've only got a few things I've got to take care of getting cleaned up and put away, but I'm going to take care of those once the camera turns off. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.